Hey, Chris.
What's up, Joel?
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure, man. What a pleasure. You got me so hyped up right now.
Well, I'm so excited, so thank you for having me on.
It's an actual pleasure, man. Like, seriously, like, the thought of being able to interview someone like you that has been killing it, for years, like being a broadcaster and killing it with his wrestling interviews, man. So, from me to you, it's an absolute pleasure, man.
Oh, well, that's very kind. Thank you. And thank you for wearing a Toronto Blue Jays hat. Knowing that I'm from
You
Toronto.
noticed.
Wow, how could I not?
I actually have been to Toronto. I think was 3 years ago,
Okay.
and it was the first time in over 20 years that I actually had flown out anywhere. And when I got there, the first day when I got to, because basically my best friend has family over there.
Oh, nice.
And literally, as I came out of the house and I was walking down the street and I was sending a video, like a selfie to my mum, like expressing how happy I am to be traveling abroad after so long. One of the neighbors actually came out and said, like, excuse me, young man, what is it that you're doing? And I said, no, I'm not interfering with you guys. Like, I'm literally just sending a video to my mum. And by that point, I had no socks on either. So people actually thought that I was actually crazy.
Oh, my gosh. Let me just turn my light on here. I think it'll look even better.
Sure.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. No. Any edits I'll just chop. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whatever you need, man. I really appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, because I've been seeing your interviews a lot, and from last year, and I was thinking, like, when you took your trip to London, and I think it was at the time that you were interviewing Simon Miller from What Culture.
Yeah, so that I actually went to London like 4 times last year, but that was just the one time I happened to be like, you know what? While I'm here,
Yeah.
why don't I do something?
And when it came to it, and I thought, like, let me get in touch with you and see if it's possible. And I was thinking in my head, I'm thinking sometimes when it comes to like celebrities and trying to even public figures and trying to get hold of them, sometimes it's difficult having go through management, or you might get the no. But when you personally let me know that it's something that you were interested in, being the next time you were in London, I was actually gassed. I was like, wow. Wow, this guy's amazing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, we're all in the same boat here, right? We're all in the same situation. We're all fans. We're all just people. So, if I can do it, sure, why not?
Nah. So when you've come to London, have you had any sort of time to yourself to do all the touristy stuff? Like, have you ever done that during your time here?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, my first time I was in London was when I was 12 years old. I went on a family trip, like spring break with my parents. And we did it all. We did every tourist thing possible. Tower of London, and we rode on a double-decker bus. And this was back when you could feed the pigeons in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Which you can't do now. I'm like, I understand why.
Yeah, because it's messy when it was pretty messy in Trafalgar Square. Like, I outside of this work in central London a lot, and when I saw those parts being like lots of pigeon shit on the floor, then I'm thinking, nah, this is not right now at this stage. It needs to be cleared up.
We also, of course, Piccadilly Circus, and we did it all. And since then, I've now been super fortunate to be able to travel a lot for my job. And I've been to London, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 times in the last 5 years.
Wow.
Sometimes it's a really quick trip where literally the only London thing I can do is like go to a pub and have fish and chips or a beer or something.
Speaking of beer, I know that you're a beer enthusiast, as am I as well. I love a good old beer. What's your beer of choice when it comes to that?
I'm a pretty light beer drinker.
Right.
And I know that in America, you've got a lot of options when you go to like the grocery store. You can get Bud Light or Coors Light. I don't mean that light beer, although, I have nothing wrong with any type of beer. But I like a Pilsner or a lager, like that would be my go-to. Actually, I think a wheat beer would be my go-to. If I went to a craft brewery and they had the whole list of everything you could have, I would go for like a Heffenweiser, like a wheat beer.
Okay, I mean, these are beers I've not really heard of.
Really?
No, not at all. I mean,
you've never heard of Bud Light?
I know. I heard of Bud Light. Like that's
Okay.
it. No. I've heard of Bud Light at the very least. It's something is not as common over here. They do have Budweiser as the main one, but Bud Light is not as common for us over here. When it comes to beers, there's brands like Amstel, Kronenberg, Birra Moretti. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I have drank all of those beers when I've been in the UK.
I remember the times of going to bars after work. One of my colleagues that I'd worked with, he used to find a way of, messing around with the system, getting these apps on the phones and then getting like a free beer for the first visit, but then knowing how to delete the app, reapply the app, and then get
brilliant.
Yeah, and then doing it every so often. It was at a point, I remember, I had like 6 beers in one place for free and doing that rotation.
Wow.
And not paying a penny.
On the same day?
On the same day.
Gee, your ways. 6 free beers sounds incredible.
I mean, there is a logic to it, but I mean, with that, I don't know if the companies have picked up on it now, especially when seeing so many fake email addresses being applied to their applications.
You ruined it for everybody else.
Well, I mean, I had to give it a try. I'm hoping it still works anyway. But again, Chris, seeing your progression in, interviews, being a broadcaster, it inspires me a lot, knowing that, you've put yourself out there in, driving to all these places and meeting so many great talent out there. Like, what was the motivation to really kind of kickstart all that?
Well, I think it was just my background working in television and working in news, where if you wanted a story, you went out and got it. That was just the way it was done. Nothing comes to you when you're working in television. You got to go out and find everything. And I think it's that background that I have and spending all that time. Like my whole career has been working in broadcasting. And I think that's ingrained in me now.
Yeah.
The other thing that news is really ingrained in me is you got a deadline. And I think that you don't see that a lot with podcasters or YouTubers. They just kind of shoot something and they're like, yeah, I'll put this up eventually. In news, you went out and you collected your story throughout the day. You shot it and you edited it and you wrote it. And then it needed to be ready for the 6 o'clock news, no matter what. And that's been ingrained in me since day one. So I just kind of carried that over. If someone said, yeah, I'm willing to do an interview with you, and I go, okay, when and where? And if they're willing to give me their time, which I think is the most precious, invaluable thing that we all have as humans. If someone's willing to be generous enough to lend me some of their time, which they know they're not going to get back, the least I can do is go to wherever they are or rearrange my schedule to make it work for them. So
it's basically like a politeness in that respect to go like, okay, if you're taking your time out to come and speak to me, then the least I can do is, make my effort and bring that back to you.
Absolutely. I think that it's a respect thing, right? And if someone who has a lot of cachet is willing to go, yeah, I'll give you some of my time, the least you can do is do whatever you can to make that thing work. And I think that unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are up and coming in the podcasting, YouTubing, just video creation world that look at it, unfortunately, as what can I get out of this? And it should be, what value can I bring to you, person of prominence, person who has, a following?
Wow. I mean, that's the nugget in itself. I mean, you've been doing this YouTube for about, 7-8 years?
Yeah, started my channel in 2011, but really didn't start taking it seriously and putting effort into it till maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Was there ever a period of time, because obviously you've been progressing, bringing up, loads of content on the channel, and I know for some people that at times it's difficult to maybe get the interview that you really want. Have you ever been at any point, any form of frustration if, say, there was an interview that you couldn't get at the time, but it just seems like you're able to get interviews left, right, and center?
I don't know if there's been frustration about not getting a particular one, because I don't get hung up on like, oh, I need to talk to this person, or I need to get X amount of views or Y amount of views or whatever. I just kind of push forward. And When I really started taking a vested interest in this, when I really started going, I think I should start to put some efforts into YouTube. And it was towards the end of 2017. And I had probably like 60,000 subscribers or something at the time. And I'm like, every time I put up a wrestling video, they do fairly well. So when 2018 came around, I said, all right, this year, I'm going to do 40 wrestling interviews this year. And that was insane to me. At that point, I had done 15, 16, something like that was the most I'd ever done. So, I always say vague goals give vague results.
Get vague results. Yeah.
Right. So I wanted a specific goal that I was going to hone in on. So I said 40 wrestling interviews this year. And that would mean me traveling, was living in Miami at the time. A lot of wrestlers live in Orlando. It's a 3-hour drive. All right, I'll go to some wrestling shows there, do some interviews there. Next time I'm at WrestleMania, I'll try to arrange someone I'm there, like going out of my way to make these things happen. So instead of going, my year is not complete until I interview John Cena and Batista, I just kind of went, I've done 2 this year. Can I do 38 more to make it to 40? Make a long story short, I ended up hitting 50 interviews that year. The next year I said, let's just aim for 50 this year, being 2019. Ended up hitting 100. So it's just, I feel like you need something to strive towards.
It's like a structure to build yourself upon.
Right. So that number one, how much further you have to go. But number 2, you also know how far you've come.
Wow.
If I said, go climb this huge staircase, go climb 10 flights of stairs. You're going to be able to go, okay, after I've done 1 flight, I only have 9 left after that. Or after you've done 5 of them, you go, I'm halfway through. And I think that that's a big thing, to celebrate those little wins along the way. And you can appreciate how far you've come.
And I can see that, even through this lockdown period, that hasn't stopped you in, conducting interviews. Like, I even seen on your Instagram that you actually interviewed Greg Hamilton was it on a face-to-face basis?
Yeah, in person. He lives like 5 minutes from me, and we're really good friends. They've opened up a lot of things here. So restaurants are back open. Yeah. Gyms are back open, which is, exciting. Obviously, with a lot of different regulations, but things are back open again. So for us to be able to meet in person, it felt good. Like I like doing these now. I've adjusted to doing these virtual interviews, but I preferred to do them in person if it's possible. Yeah,
because you mentioned about the gym, and you're very gym savvy, which I have no clue about because I'm not a gym person myself. But in terms of the gym, like has it been very like frustrating, like having done it at home, but now that you've seen like the gym open, you're like, oh my God, now I can go back out there again.
Yes. I went to the gym for the first time on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And it was the greatest day. Like it was like a reopening. I went with Brian Pillman Jr., who also,
yes, I did see. Yeah.
We went together and it felt like opening day of your favorite sport. It was like, oh my gosh, we're here. And I counted, it had been 71 days since I had been in the gym, and home workouts are great and body weight workouts are great if that's your thing, but that had never been my thing. I've been going to the gym since I was 15 years old, and to not go to the gym for 2.5 months, it felt like it was taking something away from just what I was used to doing. I'm not a coffee drinker, but going to the gym in the morning is boom. That's a shot. That's
your shot. That's your wake up energy.
Yes. And if my workout at home is being done 4 feet away from where I sit on my couch and do Netflix, that doesn't feel like the same kind of workout for me, at least. If it works for you, congratulations. That's awesome.
So you must have had a lack of motivation just being at home. You had all your equipment there, but you just thought, nah, this is not for me, man.
Well, I mean, Joel, my quote unquote equipment here is like, I'm using a cooler to do like step ups and dips. And my girlfriend was kind enough to buy us a kettlebell, and I had a few bands, but that was my equipment. So it got by, but it's nice to be back in the gym.
Now, one person I have to talk about, and I know that everyone will probably have talked to you about this, is The Rock, sure. Dwayne Johnson. I grew up on him when during the Attitude Era. It was a point where I was in school and I was bullied a lot. And when it came to wrestling, that was kind of like my getaway, as to say. And seeing The Rock on TV, it almost gave me like a feel of inspiration to keep pushing in school, to keep pushing what I was doing, and to even see him through movies. And I mean, I'll just put it out there now. I'm a little bit jealous that you've managed to interview him 9 times, which you say you're not counting, but there you go.
Counting that.
Every experience that you've had with Dwayne, like, you know, what have you been able to take away from him? Because a lot of people would have assumed seeing his Instagram and what he does on screen is that what you see on TV is what you get.
Well, you know, they always say don't meet your heroes. But I would say that if your hero happens to be Dwayne Johnson, you should 1000% try to meet your hero because he's everything you want him to be and more. And I think he's kind and he's funny and he has this quality of making you feel special in the moment, even though he's the biggest star in the world. And I think that self-awareness that he has, it's a lot because of where he came from, you know, very humble beginnings. His company is called $7 Production because
he only had $7 left.
Exactly. It's $7 in his pocket. And I think that he never forgets where he came from. So every time, I mean, actually the first time I interviewed him, a great example, it was actually backstage at Raw, which was really exciting to me because a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues had been interviewing him for the movies that he had been in, which is awesome. And I've been able to interview him for a lot of movies too. But my first in-person interaction with him was backstage at Raw. And we were in like this waiting room waiting to do the interview. And there was a WWE backdrop like waiting for us. And he walked in the room. Hello. Hey, how is everybody? Walked in, shook everybody's hand. Hello, I'm Dwayne. Hello. Good to meet you. Good to meet you. Nice to meet you. And we did our interviews. And then he took time to take a photograph with everybody in the room. And anyone that wanted something autographed, which I did, of course, he autographed things for everybody. And he knew that this moment was just beyond just doing an interview, just beyond promoting whatever it was, you know, promoting. He knew that this interview was big for you as a wrestling fan, as a movie fan, as a Dwayne Johnson fan. And that self-awareness, I think, you know, goes a long way.
I would love it one day that, you know, I've been dreaming for years, you know, the day to come where I would, you know, get a chance to meet Dwayne Johnson and just have that experience, just to say thank you for inspiring me to get a long journey of life.
Yeah, look, Rock's great, and we could talk about The Rock for.
Of course.
Next time, I saw The Rock on the red carpet for Baywatch, and you know, the way red carpet works is there's the line of press, and they basically do the interviews one by one as they make their way down the line. And Rock came up to me, he's like, Chris, what's up, man? How are you? And like gave me the big bro hug, and I'm like, oh, you remember my name? Like, I was walking around my high school raising the people's eyebrow and shouting it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And now you know my name. Like, I mean, The Rock, he's great. And he's a shining example of he says it all the time. It's nice to be important, but it's important
to be nice. Oh my gosh, yes, definitely. I mean, bringing it back to you, you know, obviously you're a huge wrestling fan. You have been for a long time. What was your first ever experience being exposed to wrestling?
My first ever experience was in the late 80s. We'd go to my grandparents' house, and it's not like my grandpa was a huge wrestling fan, but on Saturday it just happened to be on TV, and we happened to be there, so it would be on. So I remember, of course, you know, Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, but also like I remember the other characters very vividly. I remember like Coco Beware and the Rainbow Man, IRS, and that was it. That was my first exposure to it. My parents weren't really fans. In fact, my parents pretty much hate wrestling, I think still to this day, and hated the fact that I enjoyed, like I really started to get into wrestling kind of in the Attitude Era, like you were talking about there. Austin McMahon was a big feud that got me in, but The Rock's charisma really drew me in. So that was my first exposure to it in the late 80s. And then in the 90s, there were times when like I would be watching it in the basement of my house, and my dad hated that I was watching it. And then he would He would come storm into the room and stand in front of the TV and be like, "You're not watching this." And I'm like, "No, I'm watching. I just can't watch it because you're standing in front of the TV. But I really want to see what happens in this match tonight with The Rock or whatever it would happen to be."
Was there any particular things that your dad wanted you to watch besides wrestling at the time, showing that he had his hatred for it when you were watching it?
No, he wasn't saying, "Why are you watching wrestling on a Monday night when you should be watching the Toronto Maple Leafs or something, or the Blue Jays or whatever." He was just like, look, it was the Attitude Era, we're young, impressionable teenagers. And
That's true.
It was a very, very edgy product. And, if I was a father of a young boy at that time, I don't know if I'd be wanting my son watching something where they were saying "suck it" all the time and there were bra and panties matches. I understand where he's coming from, but maybe that's why I started to like it more.
Yeah, because it's rebelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like rebelling. It's like something you're not supposed to do, but you keep doing it more because your parents are telling you not to do it.
And it led me to, we started a backyard wrestling company, backyard wrestling federation company.
How many bumps did you take?
Backyard wrestling federation we started.
Okay.
And I would have to I'd tell my parents "Oh, I'm going to the gym. I'll see you in a few hours." And then I would pack my bag with my wrestling gear and go to my friend's house and have a few matches in his backyard.
Did you have any major bumps from doing backyard wrestling, or did you manage to keep yourself safe?
Isn't it funny how when you're a teenager you feel invincible?
Yeah.
You feel like nothing can
touch you. Yeah.
I did the Swanton Bomb as a finisher.
No way.
Yeah. It was, and I'll be honest, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but it was a pretty nice looking Swanton Bomb. But we were doing it onto those really, really thin blue gym mats.
Right.
So they hurt, a lot.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to not have any major injuries. I broke my finger in a really stupid grappling thing, but
right.
I got in a situation where I was wrestling on a bridge with one of my friends. I was Chris Sharp. He was Danny Courageous. And Chris Sharp and Danny Courageous had this major feud, and we took it outside the backyard. We were on this bridge, 10 feet tall, down into a little creek area. And we're fighting on the bridge. And he's like, "Throw me over." And I'm like, "Okay." And I grabbed his head and bring him to the side. I thought he was just going to hang on and drop, down onto the grass. He ends up doing a full front flip over the bridge, lands on his feet and breaks his leg.
Oh my God. Wow.
So Danny Courageous was very courageous to do that, but I was fortunate that I wasn't the one on the receiving end.
Yeah, imagine.
Funny story though. He ended up going on to become a pro wrestler, wrestling in the independents in Toronto. Actually, he wrestled under the name Will White and Bill Black. So I'm really happy that didn't deter him from having a wrestling career.
And it's the same for you, because even doing backyard wrestling, I've heard on multiple occasions that you've wanted to become a wrestler. Was that off the back of doing that backyard wrestling?
Well, yes, but I also realize now when I watch the backyard wrestling clips or even think about it that we had no idea what we were doing. You think you know what you're doing. I mean, I'm so lucky that no one got any more injured than that broken leg situation. But I thought I had some of the basics down, and I just, I knew I could take a bump, whether I was doing it correctly or not. I guess that's, for other people to decide. But that was me kind of going, I like this thing. And when we had our crowds of 10 or 15, some shows had 50 or 60 people. I was like, I love that energy. I love being able to feed off the crowd. And I think that's what a lot of wrestlers really love it's that crowd reaction.
Because even I was looking into the fact that you've been doing in-ring announcing as well.
Yeah, I've been a ring announcer. Man, I think my first time I was a ring announcer was 2008. So it's been quite a while.
It's quite
I've done it in Toronto, Cleveland, done it in Miami. Yeah, it's been great. And I've had a couple of companies where I've been, the main ring announcer. I'm still the ring announcer for Blueprint Pro Wrestling in Deerfield Beach, Florida. I just love being part of the show.
The reason why I ask about that is because when you did your interview with Justin Roberts, which by the way is one of my favorite in-ring announcers ever.
Yeah, what a voice.
The voice, when he would announce John Cena and The Undertaker, I would get goosebumps like all over, and I would want to listen to that again to get that buzz. Has there been anything from Justin that you've learned from him in terms of his in-ring skill that you've applied to your arsenal?
Yeah, definitely. The way that Justin approaches ring announcing is like an art form. And I think that, unfortunately, from the outside looking in, a lot of people just go, oh, you're saying weights in hometowns. He would go out of his way. And now I notice them when he does them. So like if Kenny Omega is wrestling Chris Jericho and they have the same hometown, they're both Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. A lot of ring announcers would go, make his way to the ring from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, blah, 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 Chris Jericho. Make his way to the ring. Same thing for Kenny Omega. You'll notice that he goes, also from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. Just a little thing. Or he said if two wrestlers have the same weight, if both guys weigh in at 215 pounds, he will change their weight by a pound so that it's not the same announcement.
Oh, interesting. I never knew that.
He said he goes out of his way to make every single announcement special. And that actually blew me away. And I was like, I knew that you did your work on this. I knew that you did your homework to make it different or special or great. But I didn't know that he was putting that much time and that much effort into it. And it made me realize it's this great phrase that I've heard all the time. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Wow.
And that shows that if he pays that much attention to the little things, just think of how much attention he'll be paying now to the bigger things.
To the bigger things. And speaking of Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho, that leads me to AEW, which you had the opportunity to be a backstage interviewer. What was that? What was it like to get that phone call to say, we want you to be a backstage interviewer for our company?
Yeah, I got a message that was basically like, hey, would you be interested in doing some stuff with us when we go on TV? And I'm like, yes, of course.
No brainer. Sure. No brainer. Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to be part of that first broadcast, October 2nd, Dynamite from Washington, D.C. And it was just so cool to be part of such a historic broadcast. The first time that there was a competing product on TV in nearly 20 years, the first time wrestling had returned to TNT. And for me to be a tiny smidgen of a small part of that show, it was really, really cool to be able to be on screen for that time, but also to be backstage and just be part of that and feel the energy, because 2019 was a pretty special year for wrestling.
Definitely.
AEW really lit a new fire under the wrestling industry.
100%.
And to be part of that firsthand, yeah, it was really special.
Are you still with AEW as far as that role, or?
Well, I was never with AEW in a full-time role. I was asked to be part of that show in DC on October 2nd, and I thought that was it. I thought I'd go in and do that show, and I'd be hopeful if I could work with them again, but I thought that was it. And then a few weeks later, they said, hey, do you want to be part of this show we have this Wednesday in Charleston, West Virginia? I said, of course I do. So I headed over there and did that segment with the Rock and Roll Express. They're building such an incredible, amazing thing there. And it's been really cool to see what they've been doing, with the pandemic and making wrestling on Wednesday night pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I've seen what was it, the field match? What was it? What was it called?
Stadium Stampede.
The stadium. Oh my god, the Stadium Stampede. It was probably the most craziest thing in how creative they were able to do that and be able to entertain like that. It felt nuts to me, but I was so intrigued by it, what they were able to pull out the bag.
Yeah, that match was entertaining. And I think that, look, desperate times call for desperate measures. And I don't know if a match like that would have existed pre-pandemic. It may not exist post-pandemic. But we're living in a time now that's completely unprecedented. And I love that they're thinking outside the box. Hats off to WWE as well. They've been thinking outside of the box. The Boneyard match, I thought was brilliantly done. Firefly Funhouse match.
Yeah.
The Money in the Bank match. And I think that it's interesting because when we first heard that WWE was going to do these movie style matches, I think we all kind of collectively
think, oh god, what's going to happen? Yeah.
Geez, come on. And then we saw it at WrestleMania and went, that actually might be the best part about WrestleMania.
And to a lot of people, it was. Even with people that I'm friends with that are wrestling fans, they agreed in the same way. They're thinking the cinematic stuff actually helped boost the interest of WrestleMania, considering the circumstances.
But I think what it does, though, is it reinforces the fact that we definitely need a crowd for wrestling to function at 100%. I'm so glad that wrestling is continuing. I'm so glad that there's live wrestling on Monday and Wednesday and Friday every single week, because it gives us this little sliver of normalcy in the world. But it's, I think that Hurricane actually put it to me this way. He said, it's like a comedian going up on stage with no audience there. You need that audience to feed off of to make sure it's working.
Yeah. And, again, speaking of AEW, like I know through recent times that with WWE, they have like the top guy, being it a John Cena or being it a Roman Reigns. In AEW, who do you feel, in your opinion, will make that role as being the face of that place on long term?
Long term, probably a lot of the people that are, in there right now. Look, the face of the company right now, I think, is Chris Jericho. I think that that's kind of undisputed. And AEW has a lot of success due to the fact that Chris Jericho's in there. And I think that when Chris Jericho signed on, it was like, oh, this isn't just another, upstart. This isn't just another wrestling company that's going to try to come in and do this thing. They've signed one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, who somehow is still in his prime. Like Chris Jericho's been in his prime for like 20 years. It's unbelievable.
Crazy, man.
So Chris Jericho's definitely one of those people who is the face of the company now. If we look ahead 5 and 10 and 15 years, I think we're going to see MJF as a champion eventually. I think we're going to see Jungle Boy as a champion. I think Luchasaurus is going to, make a real big splash there. And that's like the homegrown AEW talent. But you've got incredible talent right now in Brody Lee, Jon Moxley, Jake Hager. The list goes, obviously Cody Rhodes and Dustin Rhodes. The list goes on and on and on. But I think the one thing that AEW could eventually benefit from, and I'm sure they will in these 5 and 10 and 15 years, is more time. Right now, it's 3 hours a week to try to showcase all of their great talent. And it's a lot of talent in just a short amount of time.
What did you think of the TNT Championship, the way it looked?
I think that I'd be interested to see what the final product is.
Yeah.
I've never been a fan of colored belts.
No, neither have I.
I don't, I think that it's cool and unique looking, but I think that all the great classic belts have the black leather on it.
Yeah, because
I don't know if it deserved as much hate as it received.
Probably as much as like the Universal Championship when that first got unveiled. Like the crowd was booing the championship more and not investing in the match itself.
I just think that when you put that colored strap on any belt, the Universal title's a great example. The 24/7 title's a great example. It just doesn't make it look as good. Look, I understand that the TNT title is a very prestigious title. I mean, it's the secondary title. It's the IC title. It's the US title. I'm interested to see when it's finally done, what it eventually does end up looking like.
And in terms of yourself, like, as you said, broadcaster, you've been, covering red carpets, press junkets, interviews with wrestlers. What's the most testing question that you've ever asked anyone?
The most difficult question that I've ever asked someone?
Yes. But you were thinking, yes, I need to ask that. The people need to know.
I don't try to get in a situation where I'm going to make anyone upset.
No, but obviously you've never done that in terms of making anyone upset, because you have that aura just being this likable guy, in front of any situation. But surely there must be a question that you must have thought in your mind that you got the most from. Let's put it that way.
There's definitely been some times when you go in to do a movie interview, a celebrity interview, where if it's a really high name talent, a really visible person, sometimes they'll tell you, the movie studio will be like, all right, no personal questions here. Or let's keep it to the movie. And you're like, yeah, I wasn't going to ask about their divorce or their kids or something. But there's been times when I've had to ask, or I've phrased questions in a way that I wonder how it's going to go. And one of them that comes off the top of my mind right now is actually in London.
Oh, wow.
I did an interview for Justice League, and I sat down with Ben Affleck, and I said, well, I asked him first. This was a different situation. I asked him about he was being called Batfleck, and I thought that would be a weird question to ask him. Remember, they took Batman and Affleck and put it together in one word.
Gotcha.
I asked him about that, but then there was a time when I interviewed him for when he first played Batman, and obviously he was receiving a ton of hate for his playing Batman. Those movies, unfortunately, didn't get received that well. So I phrased it to him. I said, with great respect for you, how do you feel about the fact that people have already decided what they think about you and what they think about this movie before ever seeing it? And I could totally see how that could come across as being like, you don't like my movie or you don't like me. And I didn't mean it at all. And he took it very well. But those are the types of questions that I think are difficult to ask, but important to ask that type of stuff.
No, because I agree, because, what I've learned, especially through, broadcasters and radio heads that I've known in the industry, that, the easiest way is to, go with the easier questions first, just to start you off, and, make the person feel comfortable before going for the jugular. And go on.
I was going to say there's definitely like a science to it, especially when you have those junket style interviews where you're in that room for 4 minutes. So 4 minutes, equates to about 4 questions. And those ones, you have to be pretty strategic. Like, okay, I'll like start off with this, kind of softball question. Like, let's talk about the movie. Then maybe we'll talk about the character. And then if you have a question that you think might be one of those, like, I'll have to feel it out, like if these 2 questions go well, I will then ask this question.
The third and the fourth,
if
right?
these 2 questions don't go well, I'll just ask this other question over, I'll ask this question that's not so bad. But, with that situation, I just approached it by basically saying, with great respect for you. And I think that kind of helped take that edge off. And
besides wrestling, you also have a hobby in bass fishing, as in, and you got your own company based on that. Tell us a bit about how you got into that as well.
First of all, do you guys have bass in the UK?
I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you. The last time I actually went fishing, which I'm not really a fisher, this was when I was with my granddad. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old. And at the time, I think I do recall my granddad actually picking up like a fish this big. I'm not really in tune with terminologies with fishing, but I remember that at that point, actually, when he tried to give the fish to me, I literally started crying. So then it was just like, nah, fishing is not for me afterwards from that.
I think there's a lot of carp. Carp fishing is really big in the UK. But anyway, back to my thing. Bass fishing has been a big passion of mine since I was 4 years old. It's when I caught my first fish. And I even got to a point where I was fishing in a lot of tournaments in and around my hometown with, the lakes that were a few hours away from my hometown. It was even to a point where I was fishing in professional bass fishing tournaments on the amateur side of things. So I'd be in the tournaments with, like the Tiger Woods of fishing, like Kevin Van Dam, the best bass fisherman in the world, would be in the same tournament that I was in. I was just fishing on the amateur side of things. So my tournament fishing partner and I were looking for these specific tungsten fishing weights,
right?
Which in layman terms, basically they sink your bait down to the bottom. When you're fishing with a plastic worm or a plastic bait, it would float. And the weight, which used to be made of lead, would help sink it down to the bottom. Well, tungsten is better for the environment, helps you catch more fish. And we were starting to make these things. And we went, why don't we make these for everybody else? Why are we just making them for ourselves? I think there's a real market here. If we like these things, other people are going to like them. And that's where it began. So we started our company, Wooo Tungsten.
Woo!
That's how you have to pronounce it. Woo Tungsten.
Woo! Was it inspired by Ric Flair?
Exclamation mark Tungsten.
Was that inspired by Ric Flair in terms of that approach?
I mean, a little bit, of course. But also, when you catch a big fish, what are you going to yell? Woo! And the great thing about saying woo is it's so contagious. You know, when someone says, and you see this at every wrestling show,
Yeah.
before the show starts, woo,
Yeah.
woo, woo. Right. So when we first started the company, we had a shirt that just said woo across the chest. And I would wear it to the gym, I'd wear it to the grocery store, and you'd be walking down the aisle and people would just be like, woo. Yeah. It's awesome.
I remember, speaking of woo, I remember my first SmackDown, which was a few years ago. I remember like my buddy had like a hookup for, you know, going to the show and stuff. And literally before the show would go on, and this was like my first experience being in the crowd and watching the show, that everyone would start going woo before even the show would even began, and everyone,
of course,
and the crowd would be nuts. And I understood the power of how the fans interact with these sorts of shows. And then going back to earlier what you said about having no crowd in the audience, it seems more important now than ever in terms of like crowds at shows.
And when that finally does happen again, not just for wrestling, but for all sports, it's going to be such a big day, you know, because we're living through something really interesting right now. It's completely unprecedented. We're living through history right now. And to be able to be aware of the fact that we're living in a special time right now and special circumstances. And when we watch back wrestling clips from 2020 and we tell our grandkids about, there was this thing called the coronavirus and we weren't able to leave our homes, you know, it'll be a special time for better or for worse.
And, you know, I want to be respectful of your time. So I just have a few more points that I wanted to talk to you about.
Sure, of course.
And, you know, the first thing is like you've traveled all over America. You've practically lived in loads of parts of America. You would think like you'd be a visitor, like going to these places, but you're actually living in them, like Miami, Toronto. Toronto is where you were born at?
Yeah, just outside of Toronto. Pickering, Ontario is my hometown.
I remember going to Toronto when I got there, and I felt like it was the fact that it was so unique to me is probably because of the fact that I haven't been on holiday for so long, and your town is just amazing, especially for shopping.
Yeah, Toronto's a really special city. But yeah, you're right. I moved to the United States 10 years ago, and I've lived in a lot of different places, and now I'm getting ready to move again. This one will probably be a little bit more permanent. I'm moving to Los Angeles whenever things open back up. The plan was to move in March, but you know, obviously March is when things started to get shut down here.
Yeah. Would there have been a different place outside of the US or Canada that you would like to live at if you had the opportunity to, if something you had said, let me try something different?
Well, the reason I live in America is just because there's been so many opportunities here for what I do. You know, it's been my dream and my goal since I was a kid to be a TV host. And there's no better city in the world, no better country in the world to be a TV host and to chase those dreams than America. But if we were talking about just pure, like, I don't know, adventure or climate, technically still in America, but Hawaii is my favorite place.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I understand it's one of the 50 states, but when you go to Hawaii, it feels like you're on a vacation.
Okay, so I can let you off there because it's literally like, you know, it's like no other state in America where it's completely
it's like no
separate.
other place in the world. Yeah,
for sure. And in terms of interviews, because I know you've done loads, and I'm such a fan of your work, and I appreciate every content that you've been able to put out there, and still will continue to watch your videos. What interview you would love to have most that you haven't been able to achieve yet?
The interview that I want to have may not happen. I don't know if this person's doing interviews, but I'll keep throwing it out into the universe. Vince McMahon. And I don't want to just talk to Vince because, you know, of wrestling. Vince McMahon is a brilliant businessman and a brilliant entrepreneur. In fact, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, Joel, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon and what he created.
No, for sure.
If he'd be willing to sit down and have a long conversation just about life, just about his drive, everything. Look, he's been so incredibly successful in business as a whole. You don't need to say in the wrestling business, just in business as a whole.
As a whole.
And I'm really drawn to people that have that kind of drive. That kind of, like, look, he has the drive to build the body that he built. You know, that's obviously the habits that he's created in his daily life. And that's something that I'm really, really drawn to. So I'd love to have a conversation with him. It may not happen, but I'm going to keep saying it.
No, but let's put it in the universe, because you have that determination, which I really admire. And like you have one of those brains where it's just like, I'm going to keep going for my dreams regardless. That nothing's going to stand in my way. You know, have you always been this confident in terms of like, you know, going after what you want?
Well, I just think that it's all possible, you know, and it's not about having a confidence. It's just like, you know, when you were playing on the street as a little kid and that one kid was better at basketball than you were, you didn't just go, well, he's better than me. That's too bad. You'd go, how did you get so good?
Yeah.
And you want to follow in that path that he's been on. So if someone else is doing the thing that you want to do, that just means it's possible for you to do it too. So like I was saying earlier, I just kind of break these larger goals up into smaller goals. And that means you can just chase after them as you continue on your path. And that's kind of always been just ingrained in who I am as a person. I want to try to be the best version of myself every single day.
Wow. I mean, even hearing that, like that's inspiring me much more. I've been so determined from the first moment of starting my YouTube channel like 7 years ago. I mean, the fact that to push myself and talk to people like yourself, where I'm not normally a host, I'm normally behind the camera. I'm normally doing like the red carpets and interviews by just filming and the audio. But I said to myself, I want to try and push the barrier a little bit and see if I can, you know, have that push to say I can talk to people just as much. And
it's a new world now. You know, it used to be like, what could you put on a demo reel or, you know, a resume tape to then show to a TV station to show them what you were capable of? Now you can just build it yourself. And, you know, some of the most prominent people right now, some of the people that have the most influence are people who've all built it themselves.
And so, I mean, just to end off really, like, you know, you've dominated and still dominate with these wrestling interviews. What goals are you setting for yourself next, and what's coming up for you in the future? What are you looking to do?
Well, I want to hit 300,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. I just hit 250,000 a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
300 seems like, thank you. 300 seems like a lot. So, you know, I'm putting it out there as something to strive for. I just created a new YouTube channel for the clips from my interviews.
Saw that.
And yeah, thank you. I hope that you subscribe to it.
I have. As soon as I saw it, I clicked on that. Done.
Thank you. So that was something that kind of came out of nowhere, but I noticed that everyone else who had a same type of show as mine, where you had the long form interviews, they had a separate channel where they were putting up the shorter clips. So I said, look, I'm not going to be an idiot and ignore that. If they're doing it, if Joe Rogan's doing it, if Logan Paul's doing it, there must be a reason for this. So I started that. It's been interesting because the growth is super slow when you're starting out a new YouTube channel. So I've just had to be patient with that. And, but so those are the goals. And, you know, I think the big goal is that we can move past this. And, you know, we're all living through the same thing right now. And that's what makes the quarantine and coronavirus so unique. Is this affects everybody all across the world. Everybody's affected by this in one way or another. So the goal is to get through this and all become better versions of ourselves on the other side of this.
Well, I mean, hearing that, like, I've been doing as much as possible to, you know, keep myself active with interviews like this, and I'm working on a podcast myself, where I'm exploring, exploring my culture that I lack in. You know, I never had a dad growing up. You know, my dad's black, and I never seen him in my life. So this is something I'm exploring on the other side of that. And now podcasting seems to be one of the most dominant medias out there right now.
Podcasting is changing the game. And I think it's interesting that, like, when you click on a YouTube video and you watch for like 2 minutes, that's considered long. When you click on a podcast and listen for 20 minutes, that's considered like a relatively, oh, you only listen to 20 minutes? and it's interesting that, 5 and 10 years ago when Vine was a thing and you were watching 6-second videos, and now we're going, oh man, this latest episode of Joe Rogan's only 2 hours long. That's it. It leaves us like clamoring for more. And there's never been a time in the history of humanity where we've had these long form, unfiltered conversations that you can just click a button and boom, they're out there to the world. So if that's something that you're passionate about, and it obviously is, man, dive into it. There's never been a better time.
No, the time is now, essentially, get it all out there. And just a final thing, and I see behind you, you got a few championship belts and also your YouTube accomplishment. And it is
I collect championships a little bit.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, that's probably more than what I've ever done in my lifetime. Like, with the championship belts, what's the most proud championship belt that you got in your collection?
So I only own 6 of them. The plan was I was going to buy them and get them autographed by the person who's best known for holding that championship. So I've only done that with a few of them so far. So you see the ECW championship signed by Rob Van Dam. Just below that is the Winged Eagle.
I love that championship.
Signed by the Hulkster brother. But this one, it's not in the display case, but it should be. It's the big gold.
Oh, is this the WCW version?
By Bill Goldberg, who told me, "You're next." But it was actually Goldberg's manager that gave this to me.
Wow. So, but it wasn't from Goldberg himself. That would have been like, oh, Goldberg.
It was from Goldberg to Goldberg's manager, who's a friend of mine. He gave that to me, and then I interviewed Goldberg that day, and I'm like, well, Bill, could you sign your next? He's like, sure, I'll sign whatever you want on here. I'm like, thank you. That's so great.
Well, Chris, I want to absolutely thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I feel I've been the most excited in terms of being able to chat with you this week. And it's made my day. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, you made my day too, Joel. And thank you for your time. And thank you for a great interview. And hope that you and your family are doing well. And, we're all going to come out of this much better on the other side.
And hopefully, I mean, the next time you're in London, hopefully when travel lifts, I would love it. If you're up for it, we can go out for a beer and, see what's up in terms of, I could even show you some of the bars that we have in London that you may not have seen yet.
Done.
Cool.
Sign me up.
All right, cool. So when you're next in London, let me know and I'll link you up and then we'll get our beer on,
Sounds great. Cheers to that.